Hello and welcome. Today I will be talking about what a decent frame for recreational spirited cycling should look like, and I will discuss a bit why many modern as well as many vintage bicycle frames are not very fit and very good for the job, and it's difficult nowadays to source a high quality frame. So for the type of riding that I am talking about, that is fitness riding. If you are an avid cyclist and like to go and ride a lot, either on mountains or on roads. Also for commuting and for casual cycling. For racing, we have a lot of frames that fit the bill and that are quite okay for racing. They could be better, but they are not too bad. But for these other, like normal cyclists who are not competitors and don't get their equipment paid by sponsors, the situation is not very good, at least in my opinion and based on my experience, tastes and preferences, and this video is about that. So let us begin. Here we have a frame that is sold as a trekking bicycle frame or a hybrid. This is Trek's FX 7.1 model. It is no longer being manufactured. And what is so brilliant about this frame? Let's consider that. Let's start from this part. It has a standard quick release front wheel and it uses rim brakes. In my opinion, rim brakes are very capable, high quality rim brakes of stopping bicycles even in the rain and even in the mud, unless we're talking about some really extreme riding. So far I've been riding for decades and haven't had any problems with rim brakes. Their upside is they are usually lighter and they are less fiddly than disc brakes. There are always problems with disc brakes rubbing or squealing or getting discs getting bent if you use bicycle for commuting and stack it on parkings with a lot of bicycles and so on. So for most riders, everyone should choose for themselves, but generally rim brakes are easier, cheaper, and they do the job. So that is why I like having a bicycle that uses rim brakes. When we talk about rim brakes, even for road bicycles, I think that mini V brakes are a better option than modern rim brakes for road bicycles. I'll make a separate video about that. For now, I will just say that modern road bicycle rim brakes are inherently unsafe, in my opinion. I'll make a separate video on that topic. But I prefer using mini V brakes even for road bicycle. This is my road bicycle build, but it can also be used as a hybrid bicycle with a flat bar. Moving on, the steerer tube diameter. This bicycle uses 1 1/8 of an inch size. So that is 28.6 millimeters. And that is very convenient to find even in my country. Spare forks in case anything gets broken or damaged. Bearings for the steerer headset, bearings, cups and bearings and even the stems. They are all widely available, and it uses relatively modern, it's decades old now, threadless steerer system which uses 2 bolts to pinch the steerer in place and hold it all together. So if one bolt snaps for whatever reason, material fatigue or anything, defect, whatever, there is still one more holding it so that you have an opportunity to stop and replace it. Likewise, it uses 4 bolts for holding the handlebars. So if either one of these breaks, handlebars are still held securely enough so that you can stop and fix your bike without having an accident. So that is for this part why I like rim brakes and forks with a standard with that diameter that is usually easy to find, both in terms of spare forks and spare parts for the bearings. And also no disc brakes and no suspension. Servicing suspension, high quality suspension takes regular service in about 100 work hours. That is another chore that you have to do, and for some riders, if they cannot live without suspension or for whatever reason, it has its pros. But It has some downsides in terms of that it does require spare parts from time to time, regular service, maintenance, and it is quite heavy. Like a cherry on top of the cake, even for recreational cyclists, it really is a lot heavier than any cheap aluminum standard rigid fork. Moving on over the frame, here I've disconnected the brakes for reasons that are beyond the means. I'm replacing everything, but here we can see that it has the mounts for cables and housing on the outside. So these are the mounts for the housing stops for the rear brake, and down here we have the housing stops for the rear and front derailleur. Nothing is internally routed. Modern frames have internally routed housings and cables, and that makes any sort of replacement or even checking if everything is okay very, very impractical. Let me show you what I mean from the other side. Here. If I wish to check on this housing, if it's not working, the brake is not working well or some problem, I can just simply add a bit of a stretch. Now it's disconnected, but even when it's all mounted, you can still add a bit of a stretch that will cause the brakes to get together, and just remove it out of the stop like this, and then you can inspect the cable beneath. Is it rusted, is it frayed, or is there any problem? Does this slide normally? So that makes any sort of checkup, maintenance and replacement very easy, unlike with internally routed cables and housing where you have to find a way to fish it inside or use the old housing or cable to drag the new one in and so on. It's a real hassle. It has some very questionable aerodynamic benefits, and as far as aesthetics goes, that's for everyone to choose for themselves what they prefer, but I prefer having it this way and don't care about having some cables showing on the outside. So that is another advantage of a frame like this. Now moving on, this frame is made of aluminium and the fork is made of aluminium, and that means that as most metals, if there are any cracks or any problems, they will show on the outside. Maybe started like small hairline thick cracks, but they will show on the outside, so that I can see and notice a problem in time before it completely breaks and see for replacing the frame or the fork. For carbon fiber parts, it often happens that there are no visible signs on the outside, but the structure and the delamination of those layers and fibers starts happening, and then you can have a sudden crack, and that's not something that I'm looking forward to on a downhill. So that is another thing that I like about this bicycle, this frame. Another important thing, it has a threaded bottom bracket, and in practice this works better than those press fit modern bottom brackets. So this is like a British standard. I have an article and videos showing and explaining that. Right now camera cannot really show it. I'll show that on another frame, but in practice this turns out to be a more practical solution compared to press fit bottom brackets. If manufacturers really did the tolerances right, press fit would be from an engineering perspective a better solution. But unfortunately, if you cannot afford, I'm not sure what a Hambini bottom bracket adapter, if you cannot afford that, it costs hundreds of dollars for a good reason. I should make a separate video on that. For now, I just want to thank Mr. Hambini for making those and having them available. So if you cannot afford that, that is an extra cost and an extra hassle. Generally, press fit bottom brackets can be a real pain in the neck, so to speak. So I prefer, for having cheap parts easily available, to use just threaded bottom brackets. Then moving on, these are a few grams of extra weight. The mounts for these have like plastic caps, but there's a screw inside. You can put a screw inside. The mounts for rear rack if you wish to mount one, and also you can see on the frame at the bottom there are mounts for the rear rack, and here in the front section there is a mount for the rear mudguard. Should you wish to use a bicycle for commuting, mudguards are a must, because it's usually not just water, whatever puddle you go through. And it also has mudguards mounts for the front, for the fork, and also front rack mounts. So this gives you a lot of options with minimal extra weight. And I personally like always riding with the rear rack, because I always hold stuff, and I like to have my backpack or even panniers on the rack, not on my back, sweating and extra weight for my back and everything. So I like having that option even for road bicycles. That may be a bit extreme, but as far as frames go, I don't see any reason for commercially available frames to not give you that option. You can choose whether you wish to mount something or not. I'm sure this is not too much extra weight and not too much aerodynamic drag for these like two small thingies for recreational cycling and everything. So that is another reason why this frame is so brilliant. And now I will talk just about a few more points. Oh, I almost forgot. Seatpost 27.2 millimeters, relatively common standard size, so that is another plus. Easily available and easily sourceable. Okay, now let's put it here. It's generally best to grip bicycles for the seat post, preferably for some old throwaway seat post just for that, if you're using some torque or anything, but I want it a bit higher to show everything better now. So let's move on. This is called rear derailleur hanger. It is replaceable. You just unscrew this bolt and replace it. If you fall down, even if you lean your bicycle with a bit less caution on the right hand side where the derailleur is, you can bend the derailleur, and if this is not replaceable, if it is part of the frame, some bicycles I see are built that way without this being replaceable, then you can also bend the frame, and then when you unbend it and put it back, it might crack. Maybe not the first time, but in a few goes it is very likely to crack unless it is a steel frame. In that case you can perhaps give it a 5 or even more fixes. So this is easy to source. It's a relatively standard shape, very common, at least in my country. So when I got this frame second hand, this was already a bit bent noticeably, and someone has been already bringing it back into shape at least once. This is made of softer metal. It's aluminum, but it's built to be softer than the frame. So the first thing that gives is this hanger. It will bend in case of any problems, so we will not have the derailleur damaged, not as likely, and especially you will not have the frame damaged. You will just need to replace this or bring it back if it's not cracked. Just pay attention in the following week or so, because especially with aluminum, when you twist it back and forth, it will become very brittle and it might start cracking later on. So it's generally safest to replace it. When I got this bike, I went around local bicycle shops, and for about $9 a piece, I got 3 spare derailleur hangers. So this is what they look like. This is the bolt that's used to fix it on the bicycle. Let's unscrew it. This is the system. And so I got 3 of these. And why did I buy 3? Because a fool and his money are soon parted. Because this one is going in the garbage bin. I'm not sure how many times it's been bent back and forth, and I don't want to risk it. I will just place a new one and call it a day. Then, because I often ride to the limit of traction and my capabilities, I enjoy riding like that, especially on the weekends for fun. I often fall down, I really do. And I need a spare one in case this gets bent beneath repair or broken or anything, so I need a spare one. That's why I have a second. And when I install a spare one, I will use the third as a gauge, so I can go around shops and look for a piece like this, and if they don't have it at hand, I can find some machinist to build it out of soft aluminum. So that's the last option. So it's always good when you buy a new bicycle to see if the shop has these. Sometimes the shape is very exotic, not used on many models, model specific. It's crazy, there are no standards practically, so it's always a good idea to buy at least one spare. And it's good to have a frame that has that replaceable, because then if you fall down you won't have a total damage. The same goes for the fork. This one is easy to source and replace, so I can easily, in case I get any accidents or anything, I can replace it. The only thing that can be total this frame if you're out of luck, so what can you do? And now I will show what a threaded bottom bracket looks like in case you don't know. This is what I mean, the British standard. So the right hand side has the reversed left-handed thread, which makes the cups not unscrew under pedaling load. And this is a threaded bottom bracket, but this frame is rubbish. Why is it rubbish? There are several reasons. It has a separate derailleur hanger, it's just painted in the same color. So this is separate, that's good. This one has a different system. You screw it in from here with 2 bolts, but that's separate, and that's not that much of a problem. But it has some other problems. Distance from the rear axle to this mount, where the brake is very small. So if you put a tire that is 28 millimeters wide and a bit taller than the thinnest one, 23 millimeters or so, it will be very close rubbing, and you cannot even use 25 millimeter tire to go into some mud or something, because then the mud will get stuck here and pushed, and over time damage the aluminum frame. So that is another problem. But a bigger, that was, for me, that's a no-go. I want to be able to put 28 millimeter tires at least, and have some room to spare at least half a centimeter for any mud or any problems. I like going off-road, even on road bicycles. I want to go wherever I want, not to be limited by bicycle too much, to have the bicycle be too sensitive, like a race sports car. So another problem, I'm not sure if you can see if I try to lean it here. Let's try to get these to work with me. Okay, so here I'm not sure if it's visible, but I've tried to align bottom brackets, and you can see how short this section is compared to the other bike. And what does that mean in practice? This is from the center of the bottom bracket to the center of the rear wheel's axle, 41 centimeters long. And that means that when you sit on your bicycle, it will be a bit like this. You will practically be right over the rear wheel. And any bumps that hit the rear wheel and make this part go up will go straight to the saddle or to your back. That makes for a very uncomfortable ride. It also makes the bicycle handle less well, handle worse on very fast descents on either paved or off-road. So that's another bad idea. And finally, if you put a lot of torque into your pedals, pedal really hard, since you are on the rear wheel, the front part of the bicycle is more likely to lose weight and be like lifted up, or definitely lose a bit of traction. So that whole combination makes very little sense. Are there any upsides to that design? Well, you make the frame a bit lighter because the tubes are shorter, and for the same tube thickness and also mass or weight, you get the frame to be a little bit more stiff. And of course, since we are all racing and super fit, we need the frames to be as stiff as possible. We don't even want 1 watt of our power to be wasted into frame flexing. So manufacturers love making frames like this. Even for mountain bikes, they make these like 42 millimeters long, which in my opinion is not a very good choice for recreational cycling. And even for racing, I think it is highly questionable. I think that competitors ride what the sponsors give them, and I don't think they have a lot of choice there. Now, let me take a ruler. This bicycle has this at almost 45 centimeters. I wish it had full 45, but it's 44.5. I wish it were 45 centimeters, or perhaps that for my weight and size is the optimal length. And I'm sure that for taller riders it would make sense to make this perhaps even a bit longer. Unfortunately, manufacturers, when they make frames of different sizes, they often don't change this. What changes is this distance. The bars get further out, so the distance between two wheels, that length does get increased, but the rear wheel, how far away from the saddle it is, that doesn't change. So for a longer bicycle, there is more weight distribution towards the rear wheel, because this does not elongate along with this part, and it's not a very good thing. So two size larger frame, I don't think it would be as a good geometry as this one is. In this size, this is like M size. So those are some reasons why I think this kind of frame is great, and why it is Trek 7.1 FX. It's no longer being made, and that is a smart move from Trek, because it's not something that you make a lot of money on. These things are durable, easy to maintain, all the parts are easily serviceable and replaceable at home, and no one makes money out of that. So it's better to have newer stuff and more complicated, more expensive, and so on. So, but that is exactly the reason why I chose this, and it looks okay. I'll overhaul it and build myself a nice road bike, hopefully. And that is all I have for you today. I hope this video is at least informative, if not very helpful. Thank you very much for watching, and cheers.